Hello, Commander community. I'm Paul the Commander Theorist, and I'd like to thank you for joining us on this 5th episode of the Commander Theorems. Last time, we took a look at the partner pairings of Ishai and Rayhan, which were a variant of the Atraxa colors we had gotten from Commander 2016. In this episode, I want to take a look at one of the new commanders from Magic's core set 2019, Arcades the Strategist. Arcades is by no means a newcomer to the Magic lore. In fact, I would go so far as to say that of the legends that we've ever explored on this channel, he is among the oldest. He was spawned by the Dragon, and Arcades Sabbath was one of the original Elder Dragons from the Legends set. This Arcades incarnation was admittedly terrible, but given the origins of the Commander format having much involvement with Arcades, it feels appropriate to give him a little bit of love. The commander of our deck, however, is vastly different. For starters, this incarnation of Arcades costs 1 generic mana, and then 1 each of green, white, and blue, for a 3/5 Elder Dragon that has both flying and vigilance. So right off the bat, this creature would do great as a Voltron commander, having evasion and combat vigilance to keep it up and ready to block. But we have more to this card that makes it that I probably wouldn't build it as Voltron. Whenever you have a creature with the Defender keyword enter the battlefield under your control, you get to draw a card. Arcades also has a static continuous ability. Each creature that you control with Defender will assign its combat damage using its toughness rather than its power, and it also can attack as though it did not have Defender. For a quick lesson on Defender, in the older days of Magic, there was a creature type called Walls, which inherently, being walls, they could not attack. The wall creature type was later errated to have the keyword ability Defender, which means that they could not attack. And there have been other creatures that are not walls that also came with this ability, as we will see later on. For a long time, Commander really did not have a use for these kinds of cards because if they don't have the ability to attack, they really have little purpose outside of just being defenders. But that's what this deck is for. Arcades brings a hell of a spark to the format, literally tearing down the wall to a brand new type of deck with synergy, power, and a rather unique take on an aggressive styled deck. See, most aggro decks focus on simply ramming the opponents with your forces until they're at 0 life. There's no room to defend on the opposing turns, and quite often they are rather narrow in their scope. With this deck, our creatures aim to be able to attack, using Arcades' ability to attack even if they have Defender, and then we can keep some of our creatures on the front lines ready to block any counterattack. We can give them vigilance so that way we can attack and still have them ready to block next turn. So let's take a look at what we're going to be running. So I want to start out this theorem by covering the most important cards in the deck. The Defenders. These are the real meat of the deck. They'll be doing the most amount of work, and they're very heavily dependent on Arcades or his abilities that we will see in redundancy being on the field in order to attack, though we do run several alternatives should Arcades be disposed of. Perhaps my favorite of these is the Axebane Guardian, which if you remember from my ancient video covering Pauper Walls, this human druid has Defender. It also has the ability to tap to add X mana to our mana pool, which is equal to the number of creatures we control with Defender, and can be in any combination of color. So this is great for ramping out our other creatures, as we can make mana of any color. And this is one of the creatures that I often want out as soon as possible to maximize on that mana efficiency. We also run the Overgrown Battlement, which is similar at 1 mana less to cast. It also has an extra point of toughness, and it has a limitation to only produce green mana. You get 1 green mana for every creature with Defender on. It's still good, but not maybe as flexible. The two of these creatures are our key mana dorks, as I chose not to run something like Elf Dorks or the Birds of Paradise, although Birds of Paradise would probably be a very good option in this deck. Our next mana producer is the Sylvan Caryatid, a defender with hexproof that can also produce 1 mana of any color. This is great. It's perhaps not as explosive as the 2 previous mana dorks, but is still a very good option given it has hexproof. Now, what's important to remember that each of these creatures will let us draw a card while Arcades is in play, and so something like Wall of Blossoms is extra value, as both it and Arcades will let us draw an extra card. The Sunscape Familiar is extremely potent in this deck as it cheapens up our blue and our green spells. This makes Arcades himself only cost 3 mana, which is important to note that this spell only lessens the cost by 1 generic mana and cannot get you a double discount should it have both colors. Now we've talked about 5 defenders so far, and not one of them would be something I would want to attack with. It's a wall. So we do have a suite of offensive wall creatures that'll offer a vicious offense to make sheer irony of that defender ability. Guard Gomazoa is interesting as it has flying as a nice evasion ability, but it also prevents all combat damage that would be dealt to it. So when it attacks, it has the ability to ignore any and all combat damage that would be dealt to it by blocking creatures. We do also have Fog Bank in there as well, but the downside with Fog Bank is that it also prevents the damage that it would deal as well, so it becomes rather useless outside of being an effective blocker. Perimeter Captain is a nice little 1-drop that'll give us 2 life whenever a creature with Defender will block. In this deck, we intend to use it as a technical 4/4 for 1 white mana that gives us 2 life whenever we block stuff. Trivia time! What could be better than a 4/4 for 1? How about a 6/6 for 0? Shield Sphere, a creature that was virtually unplayed, unheard of, unknown, and unwanted before this deck came out, costs 0 mana to play. It literally costs nothing. If it blocks, it'll get a +0, -1 counter on it, which is a moot point given that we will always be wanting to attack with it. Stalwart Shieldbearers is another neat lord for Defender, giving our Defender creatures +2 toughness, which can be quite the buff to damage. Tree of Redemption makes an appearance here as well as an effective 13/13 for 4 mana that can also swap its toughness with our life total, so it can become a 40/40 for 4. It's a little bit risky to use like this, but it's very potent if it works. Wall of Denial is another powerhouse, a 3-drop with 8 toughness. It also has Shroud and Flying as excellent protection and evasion. Wall of Essence gives us life gain whenever it's dealt combat damage. It's kind of funny, this sort of has lifelink when it attacks, as we gain life almost like lifelink. Wall of Junk is similar to Shield Sphere in that the drawback is irrelevant. It's a 7/7 for 2 that would bounce itself back to your hand when it blocks. Not a problem if we only plan to attack with it. And our last aggro wall, irony, is Wall of Shards with 8 toughness on a 2-drop that has the cumulative upkeep of gaining an opponent 1 life. Give it to someone who's low on life and then bash them to take it away. That's the fun way to do it. I did also include a few value engines that'll give us some extra card draw. Wall of Mulch can turn our walls into card draw for 1 green mana each, so if we should be facing a board wipe that we cannot evade, we can turn all of our about to die creatures into card advantage. Wakestone Gargoyle can give creatures we control with Defender the ability to attack as though they did not have Defender, which is another instance of Arcades' ability. Redundancy is always a good thing in Commander you want to keep on the lookout for, as we always will want extra instances of powerful key abilities. Tetsuko Umezawa Fugitive makes our creatures with 1 or less power or toughness unblockable. This is all but 5 of our creatures, and those creatures do not even attack often anyway. We also will run a selection of support to our defensive crew to help buff them up and swing in protected. Angelic Chorus, a newer card, bolsters our life total whenever a creature hits play equal to their toughness. This is a very similar ability to Tristani Selesnya's voice, albeit on an enchantment. Assault Formation again brings extra redundancy to our board to having both of Arcades' abilities, and we can sink 3 mana in it to bolster our toughness by +1. Aura Shards kills off enchantments, making our spells come with even more value. Blind Obedience will tap down artifacts and creatures our opponents have entering their battlefield, which will keep their board clear for our assault. I personally choose to run both Ghostly Prison and Propaganda to act as a small bit of protection should our opponents somehow be able to have a little bit more aggro than we can manage. Heuristic Study is more and more popping up in every blue deck I run as an invaluable source of card draw. Rolling Stones' Oracle text lets walls with Defender attack as if they did not have Defender. It just came out at a time where Defender was not yet a keyword, and so what the card says is a little older and dated. Slagworm Armor bolsters the toughness of the creature equipped with it by 6, making it even the cheapest wall we run ginormous. Skeleton Key is a grossly underplayed card, and this deck makes it so useful. If the equipped creature has 0 power, it is entirely unblockable. Even as 1 power, anything bigger than it cannot block it. This also gives us some nice card cycling ability, and of course Meekstone is invaluable in keeping our opponent's creatures permanently tapped down. This can be extremely frustrating for our opponents, as our creatures can all untap without a problem. So one of the other fun things this deck can do is perform one-sided board wipes. There exists a good amount of board wipe effects that, because our creatures have much higher toughness and minimal if any power, we can avoid, and we can make the most use of it by making sure our opponents cannot avoid it. Wave of Reckoning, Slaughter the Strong, Retribution of the Meek, Fell of the Mighty, Dusk, all can kill off opponents' boards while leaving ours pretty much unscathed. This is especially useful in situations where we're set up for the kill, but there might be a few too many creatures blocking our way on the opposing fields. So the main strategy with Arcades often involves him pretty much sitting on the field as an enchantment. We rarely will attack with him, as we do not want to risk losing his ability. This is also why I chose to run multiple instances of that same effect, as if one instance is removed, we do have redundancy to back us up. We will also want to drop our low-costed creatures as soon as Arcades is on board, because every one of those defenders will help us start racking up card draw, and it'll help us up our combat ability. This deck is interesting in that should we need to fall from the offense to the defense, our creatures can more than handle themselves in battle. The benefit of Arcades is that many of our creatures' toughness vastly exceeds the power of most creatures we will face early game. Not many games will see something with 4 power or more on turn 2 which are capable of stopping our incoming walls. Do note that this is merely an introductory build for this deck. It's a very relaxed take on this deck, and I feel like it's probably the most fun that I've had building into a new style. There are a great many ways to take it from here, and I personally feel that with a lot more control elements, and maybe some stack sludge flow, it's possible to make a bit more of a competitive, tuned deck here. Cards that will hinder our opponents, like the 2 versions of Thalia, maybe Crawl Space, while not quite as on theme with what is effectively Wall Tribal, can help make this deck gain a foothold against our opponents, as they'll end up struggling to keep up with us. As with every deck theorem, we have included for your convenience a link to the tapped out deck list in the description below. All you have to do is click on that first link and you can see every single card in this deck, including the ones we did not discuss here. For more Commander theorems, please consider subscribing today with your notifications turned on. It's as simple as clicking that little bell, and you prevent YouTube's crappy system from missing out on a video. If you enjoyed this video, which I hope you did, please tap that like button so others will see that this is worth a watch. I thank you for spending some time here with me today, and I hope the rest of your day is just as wonderful. And as always, I will see all you guys, gals, and non-binary pals in the next video.